A wedding photo from 1906 revealed the bride was already dead. Imagine discovering an old family photograph in your grandmother's attic. It's a wedding photo from 1906. The groom stands proudly beside his beautiful bride in her flowing white dress. But as you look closer, something feels wrong. The bride's eyes seem glassy. Her posture is too perfect, too still. Her skin has an unnatural pallor. Then you make a horrifying discovery. The bride in this wedding photo has been dead for 3 days. This isn't fiction. This isn't a horror movie. This is the true story of one of history's most disturbing wedding photographs, and it reveals a Victorian practice so macabre, so deeply unsettling, that modern minds can barely comprehend it. The photograph surfaced in 2019 when a family was going through estate items after their grandmother's death. At first glance, it appeared to be a typical Edwardian wedding portrait, formal, stiff, but seemingly normal for the era. But genealogy research revealed something impossible. According to death records, the bride, Elena Konstantinovna, had died of typhoid fever on March 15, 1906. The wedding photograph was dated March 18, 1906, 3 days after her death. How could a dead woman be standing in her own wedding photo? The answer lies in one of history's most disturbing funeral practices, post-mortem photography, taken to an extreme that defies modern understanding. This wasn't just a photograph. It was an elaborate theatrical production involving a corpse, a grieving groom, and a society that refused to let death interrupt their plans. To understand this macabre wedding, we need to dive into Victorian and Edwardian attitudes toward death. Death wasn't hidden away in hospitals and funeral homes like today. It was a central part of daily life, ritualized and photographed with disturbing regularity. Post-mortem photography was incredibly common. Families would dress up their deceased loved ones, pose them as if alive, and take formal portraits. These weren't quick snapshots. They were elaborate productions requiring photographers, props, and careful staging. But photographing a corpse as a bride? That was extreme, even by Victorian standards. The practice emerged from a collision of grief, denial, and social obligation. In 1906 Russian society, marriages were often arranged for political or financial reasons. Wealthy families had invested significant resources in wedding preparations, guest accommodations, and social obligations that couldn't be easily canceled. When Elena died, just days before her wedding, her family faced an impossible choice: cancel everything and lose face socially and financially, or find a way to fulfill the contract. The preparation of Elena's body for her wedding was a masterclass in Victorian funeral artistry taken to horrifying extremes. Professional morticians and photographers worked together to create the illusion of life. Elena's body was carefully embalmed and positioned using a complex system of hidden supports. Metal rods held her torso upright. Wires positioned her arms and hands. Her head was supported by a neck brace hidden beneath her dress collar. Makeup artists applied cosmetics to give her skin a lifelike appearance. They painted color onto her lips and cheeks, They even inserted glass eyes to replace the clouded ones death had left behind. The wedding dress itself was modified to hide the apparatus keeping her upright. Extra fabric concealed the support structures. The bouquet was wired to her hands to maintain the proper position. Most disturbing of all, photographers used techniques to make her appear alert and alive. They propped her eyes open with small metal devices and positioned lighting to minimize the telltale signs of death. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of this story is the groom's participation. Dmitry Alexandrovich not only agreed to the macabre ceremony, he actively participated in posing with his dead bride for formal photographs. Why would a man agree to such a disturbing charade? The answer reveals the brutal realities of arranged marriages in early 20th century Russian aristocracy. Marriage contracts in wealthy Russian families were binding legal and financial documents. Breaking an engagement could result in massive financial penalties, social disgrace, and legal consequences that could destroy a family's reputation for generations. Dmitry's family had invested heavily in the wedding preparations. Guest accommodations, catering, entertainment, and gifts represented months of planning and enormous expense. More importantly, the marriage was designed to merge two influential families and their business interests. Elena's death didn't cancel these obligations. It simply complicated them. Contemporary accounts suggest Dmitry was initially horrified by the proposal, but faced with financial ruin and social destruction, he agreed to participate in what was essentially a marriage to a corpse. Here's where the story becomes even more surreal. There was no actual ceremony. The wedding photographs were staged purely for legal and social documentation. Russian Orthodox law absolutely forbade marriage to the deceased. However, the photographs would serve as evidence of the wedding for business and social purposes. Family friends and business associates who couldn't attend the ceremony would receive copies of the wedding portraits as proof the union had taken place. The photography session itself was reportedly nightmarish. Elena's body had to be repositioned multiple times as rigor mortis made her increasingly difficult to pose. The smell of death, despite embalming efforts, was overwhelming. Several people involved in the production became violently ill. Photographers later described it as the most disturbing commission of their careers. The contrast between the formal wedding portrait traditions and the reality of posing a corpse created a psychological disconnect that haunted everyone involved. What happened next reveals the extent to which wealthy families would go to maintain social appearances. The families launched an elaborate cover-up that lasted over a century. Official records were altered to show Elena had died after the wedding, not before. Death certificates were backdated. Church records were modified. Wedding guests who knew the truth were paid for their silence or threatened with social and financial consequences. The wedding photographs were distributed to business associates and distant relatives as evidence of the successful marriage. For decades, the families maintained the fiction that Elena had died shortly after the wedding from complications related to her illness. Even family members in later generations believed the official story. It wasn't until genealogical DNA testing and detailed record research in the 21st century that the truth was uncovered. The conspiracy was so thorough that historians estimate dozens of people were involved in maintaining the deception, including church officials, government clerks, photographers, and family servants. The psychological impact on everyone involved was enormous and long-lasting. Dmitri never remarried and reportedly suffered what we'd now recognize as severe PTSD. He was haunted by nightmares and developed an obsessive fear of photography. Family servants who helped prepare Elena's body for the photographs quit immediately afterward. Several reportedly needed medical treatment for psychological trauma. The photographers involved in the session destroyed their equipment and refused to ever discuss the commission. One reportedly burned all his negatives and prints from the session, keeping only the final wedding portrait that was delivered to the families. Even family members who learned the truth decades later reported feeling disturbed and betrayed. The discovery that their family history contained such a macabre secret created lasting psychological effects across generations. This disturbing wedding photograph reveals the extreme lengths to which people will go to maintain social appearances and honor financial obligations. It showcases a world where individual human dignity was secondary to family honor and business interests. The case also highlights how thoroughly history can be manipulated when powerful families control the narrative. For over a century, this story remained hidden because the families involved had the resources and influence to maintain their deception. Modern forensic analysis of the photograph reveals clear signs that Elena was deceased when it was taken. Her skin tone, eye appearance, and body positioning all indicate post-mortem photography. But without genealogical research and modern investigative techniques, the truth would have remained buried forever. The wedding photograph of Elena and Dmitri represents one of history's most extreme examples of post-mortem photography and social deception. It reveals a world where death was simultaneously familiar and terrifying, where social obligations could override basic human decency. This isn't just a curiosity from the past. It's a reminder of how far people will go to maintain appearances, honor contracts, and avoid social disgrace. The photograph serves as a disturbing window into a world where individual humanity was often sacrificed for family honor and financial obligation. The next time you see an old family photograph, look closer. Sometimes the most normal-looking pictures hide the most extraordinary secrets. And sometimes the people in those photographs aren't quite as alive as they appear. In the case of Elena Konstantinovna, death didn't stop her wedding. It just made it infinitely more horrifying.